The year was 1954. Senator John F. Kennedy just had his second surgery on the spine, and while in his recovery, he decided to do something useful. He and his aides began to write a book about his most admired people in history, ones who he believed had the courage to do what they do. Here are some of the people that he listed. First is John Quincy Adams. Quincy Adams was probably the most known in this book. When he was in office, he supported things that had little regard for his party, but believed for them to be the best for his country. This led to him being an outcast in the party. He decided to resign his Senate seat and instead ran independently. He also did not decide to campaign around and try to garner votes, as many people already knew him. He ran for office again, and this time won in a landslide. He stayed in Congress until his death. Next is Daniel Webster. Webster had always been an outspoken critic of slavery. In 1850, Henry Clay, a pro-slavery Southerner, had a plan for compromise that would keep the Union intact, but he needed Webster's support. Webster knew that everyone would be shocked at his support for a plan that negotiated with slave-holding states. Still, his top priority was to hold the Union together, so he agreed. At the speech announcing the plan, Webster talked for 3 hours, and although many did not like the plan, he persuaded them to. This success, however, did cost him the dream of becoming president due to the many opposing his stance. Next is Thomas Hart Benton. Thomas Hart Benton was a senator in the southern pro-slavery state of Missouri. He did, however, think that the Union was the best beyond all else. While many people in Missouri believed that they should pick sides in case the South seceded with the Union, Benton did not believe slavery was a big issue. He thought that it was just an issue of the past, with it ending with the Missouri Compromise of 1820. In 1851, Benton lost his place in the Senate, but he later returned to the House of Representatives as St. Louis's congressman. Realizing that this was his last opportunity to make a difference, he delivered a speech denouncing the Kansas-Nebraska bill, which permitted slavery in the new territories of Kansas and Nebraska. Despite his political mishaps, his efforts helped Missouri to not be one of the states wanting to secede. Sam Houston is the next man JFK profiled, and it started with a continuation of the Kansas-Nebraska bill. He also despised it, believing it to be a reversal of the Missouri Compromise of 1820. He did not want the North and the South to be uncompromised, if that makes any sense. When he became senator, he agreed with the views of his Southern colleagues. However, as time passed, he began to believe that the way of thinking he had was not the correct way, and adopted the Northern stances on issues. This put him at major odds with his party's beliefs. He left the Senate to go back to Texas. The Texas governor also wanted to secede. So, in response to that, Houston ran for governor and won. But more people wanted to secede. A party was made in 1860 for it, and Sam Houston resigned. Next is Edmund G Ross. Ross is probably the least known on the list, but played a big part in a big historical event. He single-handedly prevented the conviction of President Andrew Johnson after he was impeached. When Ross was elected to the Senate, a battle was raging between Congress and the president. The Radical Republicans, a faction of the Republican Party, planned to get rid of Johnson, but they needed 2/3 majority to convict him after his impeachment. When it was time to vote, 7 Republicans voted against the conviction, with Ross being the final one. This vote was extremely important, as the other side lacked the number of votes to convict Johnson. This ended Ross's political career, but his bravery was unsurpassed. Lucius Quintus Cincinnatus Lamar is next. In 1874, he made a speech to the House of Representatives lamenting the death of Charles Sumner. Lamar was also from Mississippi, a state that was plagued by Sumner's Reconstruction efforts. This speech showed that Lamar was so set on getting the North and the South to work together and compromise, even though he was a Southerner. Also, this speech improved his status in politics, but held a very mixed reaction to it. In 1877, Mississippi held a system that said if you had silver of any kind, you could trade it in for coins. Lamar saw this as an economic disaster and would not vote for it. He explained his decision to the people, who were very happy with his explanation. He later served as a judge of the Supreme Court. Next is George Norris. This was a short one. First, Norris got a powerful Speaker of the House, Joe Cannon, to resign, ending the conservative Republican stronghold in the House. Second, he tried to get President Wilson to not arm ships with much firepower, as he believed it would not only put the USA in the World War I, but weaken what they had. Wilson found out that he didn't need approval from the Congress and went through with it anyway. Last, he campaigned for a very unpopular political candidate against President Hoover. They lost in a landslide, and amidst his political failures, he always stood for what he believed in. Last is Robert A. Taft. He was also known for speaking his mind and exemplified that with his speech at the Nuremberg trials. This earned him harsh reprimands from his party. Going into the 1946 election, the Republicans felt like they had a great chance. They were nervous when Taft was to speak, thinking it would cost them seats in the Senate. His speech was about the criminals not knowing that they had death sentences, but it was not agreed upon. The Republicans got their seats, and Taft had no long-term damage to himself. Kennedy ended the book saying that courage is still alive today, which it is. Even though there is controversy about who wrote the book, either John F. Kennedy or his aides, it was still an absolute stunner. This was my project on Profiles in Courage.